So what I'm going to take us through today is around crafting better experiences. So a bit of an introduction to service design and what it is, and starting to explore some of the common questions that I get asked around service design. And then what I'll do is I'll go through that. And then if you have any questions or anything like that at the end, feel free to send them through, or as we go as well, feel free to also share them in the chat. And then at the end, I'll start to go through and answer some of those. So as I'm going through, just think of anything that you're wanting to know a bit more on, you wanted me to dive a bit deeper into. More than happy to answer them. So I thought I'd start off a bit in terms of an introduction to who I am. So I'm Sarah Heimeyer. So I'm currently located in Sydney, Australia. So it's around 7 a.m. here. Still a bit dark because we haven't gone into daylight savings yet. And then in terms of my background, so I'm currently lead service designer at Prosper, where we do lending for small businesses. And then I also work in my own business as well, that's called Sarah Heimeyer Design, where I do consulting, a lot of training, running workshops, and then also coaching of designers as well, basically to help them to learn about design or up-level them in certain areas that they're wanting to progress in. And then in terms of my background, so I've worked across a lot of different organizations. So I've worked in some of Australia's largest financial institutions, leading fintechs, and then also other other startups as well in Australia. And then also had a bit of a different background as well in industrial design, which I'll go through a bit more as we kind of progress. So the first one that I really wanted to deep dive into was about service design. So what is it? And what are the different components of it? And also, like, what are some of the skills that you can use and apply in different areas? So the first one that I really wanted to deep dive into is what is service design? So starting to really start to explore what it is and what it's all about. So the key component around service design is really it's gathering those insights and understanding. And so as part of that, you're doing deep qualitative and quantitative research, where you're speaking to customers, you're observing them, really starting to understand them, or you're running interviews with them, or you're doing more quantitative research where you're starting to gather a lot of different insights from people. And then that's helping to then guide you around any interviews or any other types of activities that you're doing. It might be a contextual inquiry, it might be usability testing, it might be any other type. And then as part of that, you're really uncovering insights to start to highlight the needs and the frustrations of customers. And it might be other people across the organization that you're working with to do this understanding and gather these insights. Because service design really looks internally at how the organization works, and then also externally around the customer experience, so what's working and what's not. And the insights are really about identifying any of the opportunities that we have as an organization to really start to improve that customer experience. And then also identifying the ones that will bring the most opportunity for customers and the business as well, and being able to communicate that to people. And then so once you've gathered those insights, it's really about defining that experience vision. So working collaboratively with your subject matter experts, with your customers, to really start to facilitate workshops and identify what is that vision that you're working towards. So what is that future state that you're wanting to deliver? And then also identifying any ideas or running ideation sessions to start to generate what does that look like, to really help to form that, and then testing that with people as well. And then it's also about identifying the ideal business. So what is that ideal future state, like I was saying, but where do teams, processes, and systems come into play? And so how do all of those connect together to be able to deliver that future state that you're working towards? And do you potentially need to swap out some of the systems to allow for that future state? Or is it causing a lot of pain points for your internal teams and meaning that they can't progress forward? And then it's also about visualizing the story of the experience. And so being able to communicate it to people in a way that's really visual and able to start to demonstrate what it all looks like and how does it all come together. And so what I really love to do is to put together different levels of the experience and that future state that we're getting towards. So doing one that's really high level, and then we can deep dive into it and designing artifacts that are a bit more detailed for customers. And then the last one is around tactical and strategic solutions. And so this is where it's around being able to execute that vision. So we've identified that vision, and now how do we break that down and make it in a way that we can deliver as an organization? And so taking it step by step. So we have this ideal state, and then it's like, how do we break that up? So this is our current state. How do we get a step closer to that future state? And what do we need to change in our experience to really start to get there? And then it's also about making sure that we prioritize the opportunities that are the most important, that are going to break down and provide us that value as we progressively get towards that future state. So making sure that we're releasing that value and delivering towards that future state. So we're getting benefits for the business and also benefits for the customer around what they find desirable. And then it's around, so what I really like to think about is that it's really around that incremental value that you're giving to people as well. So those are kind of like the key way that I like to describe service design. So it's gathering those insights, understanding people using a human-centered approach, defining that vision of where we want to get to, and then figuring out how do we incrementally release that value to customers and the business, because it's really about meeting both of those needs around the business needs and then also the customer needs as well, and figuring out what is that solution that works best. And then one of the questions that I often get asked is like, what is the difference between product design and service design? So I like to think that service design is really looking at that really big picture and figuring out how does everything connect. So we're looking at the back of house experience. So how are things done by a support team? How does our financial team work? How do all those different teams work? And then how does that help us to deliver that customer experience? And so really looking at some of those parts that might not be known, and looking at the systems and the processes that are part of that, and also the touch points. Whereas product design is really deep diving on a certain part of the experience, and it's really looking at the digital assets or the digital solutions and the specific features that we're releasing to customers. And then it's also a lot of it's about that UI and UX experience. So that's kind of like the key components, whereas service design is really looking at the services that we provide. So what is that? The needs of customers and their expectations that we're delivering towards, which I kind of called out here. Both of them are really looking at creating value for the customer, for the users and the business. And the users might be people internally in the business, or it might be your actual customers who are paying for the experience. And then one of the other questions that I often get asked is, how do I work with other disciplines? So this could be product design, it could be visual designers, or it could be even just people across the organization. And so my role, I always like to think, is that I can't really do my role without anyone else. And so my role is really about figuring out how does everyone do their job? Like, what is their role? What value do they deliver as part of the experience? What's working, what's not in their role? And really working closely with them. And so I work to really facilitate workshops with them to basically gather these understandings and then synthesizing that into insights and then playing it back. And so I often call them subject matter experts, so SMEs. So I'm working with them quite a lot to really start to understand what are they doing, what's working, what's not. And then also, what is that ideal state? So building that with them and gathering the ideas from them as well. As to what's working, and then getting their buy-in from that to be able to really start to implement that experience as well. And then how I work with, say, product designers as well is quite closely. So I'll often do a discovery piece of work that's like really early on. I'll work with product managers or product owners to really start to understand that. And then start to bring in, once we understand the opportunity that we're deep diving into, I'll then bring in our product designers to really work closely with them to start to design some of those visual artifacts that we have in the screens and the digital experience that customers will engage in. And so working quite closely. And so I always like to define who's on my core team, who are we working really closely with, and then who's on that extended team. So how do we get that buy-in and that influence and understanding from those people so that they know that what we're going to deliver is valuable for them. Then the other one that I always think's really important around service design is like, what are the unique skills a service designer needs? And so one of the key ones, which you might have picked up on, is really around that facilitation. And so a lot of my role is around facilitating workshops, working closely with people, gathering those insights and understandings and understanding from them. And so that's a really cool need for a designer in general, but also really essential for a service designer to be able to facilitate workshops, to gather that understanding, or to run ideation workshops, or even I always see facilitation being really important as part of running research as well, because you're facilitating a session and you're gathering insights, and you're kind of starting it off with what are your objectives, and then you're gathering those and gathering that insight and understanding, and then you're closing it through you. So you're kind of taking people on a journey. So those skills are really important, because I kind of see it as the whole entire project is about facilitating people through a process to come to an outcome. And so it's not just in meetings or sessions that you're running, it's really the whole entire project that you're facilitating. And then another key skill I find is really important for service design is around improvisation. So often you'll be running sessions where it might go off track. What you've planned isn't turning out how you've expected. And so it's really about that ability to think on your feet and make those changes, or even being able to go, what do we do next? And so I'll often come up with, have problems that are super complex, and I'll need to come up with new ways to be able to facilitate, or come up with new ways to start to come up to work with others. And as part of that, it's really about understanding what are the core foundational kind of elements around how do you facilitate good ideas, but then how do you come up with a new way to work with others as well. And then as part of working with a lot of different people, it's really around that empathizing, so developing empathy for them. And then also the next one that I have here is around that curiosity. And so asking a lot of questions to really deeply understand an area, so that you kind of become a bit of a subject matter expert in that area as you're developing that understanding, because that allows you to build that buy-in with your stakeholders. And it allows you to then build that empathy for them as well, to really understand what are they doing day to day, what's not working for them, what's working for them, what's not, where do they see their role going to in the future, how does it change if we improve this experience for them. And the same with customers as well. So developing that empathy and curiosity for their lives and for how they engage with you as a business, or that kind of problem that you're solving. And then human-centered, so the design, so human-centered design is super important for service design. So you're designing for humans and how they interact with the experiences. So using those tools and frameworks is super essential. So really knowing that deeply. And then holistic. So service design is really around that, designing that whole end-to-end experience and understanding it as to what changes, what are you improving, and how does it all connect together. And so I always like to think that you might be working, so you have a whole end-to-end experience for your whole organization, and then you might be deep diving on a specific section of it. But it's always about keeping in mind the whole overarching experience as well, as to what's working, what's not, and then what are those touch points involved in it, and how do they connect to other parts of the experience? So if you change this touch point here, does it affect another one that's further along the journey? Or should you also update that one as well, because they're quite similar in terms of the experience? And so it's really about understanding all of that and figuring out what to improve holistically as part of the experience. And some of the other ones that I always think are really important in terms of service design and some of the skill sets to have is really around that being focused on the value that you're going to be delivering. And so value for the customer and value for the business, to be able to communicate, this is what we're going to, as a business, this is the outcome that we're going to work towards, and this is why we should make that change. And then it's also about having the internal and external focus. So I've kind of talked a bit about that, but it's about looking internally about how we work, but then externally for the customers as well. And then it's also about a lot of systems and experiences can be super complex. And so it's about how do you make that simple for people so they can really start to understand it and be able to understand a whole end-to-end experience for a business that might be massive. And how do you simplify and reduce that down so it's easy to grasp and get people involved in? And then I often have like a high level experience, and then I'll deep dive into a more detailed one once I've got people on the same page. Because often what I find is businesses don't actually realize their whole end-to-end experience until you start mapping it out for them. And so it's about kind of bringing them along that journey. And like I said, facilitating, bringing them on that journey to really get involved in it. And then the next one that I wanted to deep dive on is, what value does service design deliver in the organization? And so I always find that the value that we deliver is that holistic approach. So you're looking at the whole experience and you're starting to understand what's not working and what needs to be improved. And so as part of that, you're understanding where are some of these value pools that you can start to unlock. And so some of the projects that I've worked on have really started to look at, say, for example, a digital transformation that I worked on, which was looking at our loan management system. And as part of that, it was understanding what's working as part of that and where do we want to get to in the future. So therefore, what's holding us back in our current system that we need to change as part of that so we can start to deliver better experiences for our customers. We can save time for our agents and allow them to do the work that's really valuable for our customers. So having more impactful conversations rather than working on some of the stuff that's like more the back end or support or more of the low value activities that aren't as valuable for customers and aren't giving the people who are working on that experience, like our support and sales agents, that aren't really interesting for them, that we're not using their skills the best. And so my roles are about really understanding what that is. So what role are they doing today? And how do we remove some of those manual activities that they're doing so they can work on better value activities? And therefore, as part of that, it often saves the organization money and it allows us to then scale as a business. Because if we're performing all of these manual activities internally, say if you're having to transcribe notes, you're having to re-enter information, it makes it really hard for an organization to scale and to get to a really big level because that means that you need to employ more people to better do the job. And it means that it potentially will extend out the time it takes to do something in the business. Or it means that, because it's not systematized, it means that often errors can happen or mistakes can happen. And you probably won't find out about them for quite a long time. And so it's really about allowing that efficiency as part of the organization, but creating better experiences, because the other part of it is that customer experience. And so a project that I've worked on previously was around financial advice. And we were looking at how do we help customers to understand where they want to get to in their future? How does money help them? And linking that to their goals. And so designing an experience that's really centric to what people were looking for allowed us to design an experience that was basically world-class in terms of how customers can engage in their finances and allowing the organization to then deliver an experience that customers want. And therefore they're coming to us for, and they find really valuable as well. So there's a lot of different value areas that service design can deliver on that allows us to have a really big impact across the organization internally and then externally as well. So what I thought I would do now that I've explained service design, I thought I'd go a bit into in terms of like a bit about my journey. So how did I get into service design? The first one that I want to deep dive into, like I said, is how did I get into service design as my career? And so I thought as part of that, what I'll do is I'll give a bit of a background in terms of where I started off, some of my education and things, and then how I got into service design. So I did industrial design at uni. So really looking at how do you design experiences, looking at like physical products, how do you design those? How do you make sure that they meet the need of customers? And then also, how do you manufacture them? But then also, how do you, one of our components was really around service design. How do you design experiences and how do you understand how they work and the systems around them? And then from there, I did a lot of roles that were more physical product design. So designing, working with an architecture company to design and manufacture sculptures or different, one of the things that we did was like an elevator, so designing more physical products, but then also working with a small startup where we were designing a new tool, a new product for the market. And so it was bike lights. And so designing those and coming up with and understanding those problems that customers have to then be able to design a new product for the market. And then another role that I had was working at Atlassian. So I was doing more UX research. And so looking at all of the research and running that for Confluence and really understanding our users and running all of the different research for the different pods and teams that we had at the time. And then from there, I decided that I really love doing research, but I really wanted to get into doing a bit more around the experience. And so that's when I started to transition into service design. And from there, I was able to take all of the deep understanding that I had for research and really start to apply that to service design, because like I was saying, service design is really about that understanding and developing those insights. And so it allowed me to have a really deep understanding of how to get to different insights for customers and for the organization as well, and to run really deep interviews as well. And so as part of that kind of transition, I was able to bring all of those skills along to really help to grow my career and to be a really good service designer. And so I've been in the industry for over 10 years doing service design. And then as part of that, some of my other things that I really enjoy do, which I feel like kind of add on to being a good service designer, is I really enjoy improv. So like I said before, I find improvisation is really helpful for design, because you're able to get through that ambiguity. And then I also really love doing watercolor painting or anything like that. And so I find that's really helpful when you want to visualize an experience as well, is to be able to draw it or sketch it up to start to communicate something that might not actually be visible, but you're able to communicate something that is kind of you're not really seeing normally. So kind of like this one where you're able to illustrate the front and the backstage, and so communicating some of those different parts of the experience. Oops. And then why did I get into service design? So I kind of covered that a bit before, but I really enjoy understanding and learning new areas. And so I love to deep dive with someone and really start to understand their role or understand their situation. And so an example of that is when I've been, say, working with our treasury or collections team to really understand their experience. So what is their role? What's really important to them? What are some of the activities that they're doing that aren't delivering that much value or taking a long time, or that they don't see as beneficial, that we could automate for them or systematize? And basically becoming a really deep expert in that area, so that I can then apply that to all of the other experiences that I'm building out for the business as well. And so I really enjoy getting a deep understanding of different areas and being able to use that to create new ones and think of it differently as well, because I'm coming to it as an external person that's now starting to understand what are they doing as part of the organization, or even customers understanding. I've worked in finance quite a bit, but understanding people's money, what are their behaviors around that, and really deeply understanding some of the insights that are involved in that, and the mindsets that people have, or the needs that they have around their finances, or some of the unspoken needs that people have. And so getting a deep understanding of that and then coming up with new solutions to craft a really good experience. So the next one I wanted to go through is the service design toolkit. So this is, I thought I'd just take us through some of the things that I use to be able to basically design those experiences that I've spoken about. So how do I analyze customer journeys? And so the way that I do this is I'll map out an end-to-end experience, all of the different touch points involved in it, and I'll get really deep in terms of that. And so it won't be grouping together a lot of steps. I'll make sure that everything's an individual step, because what I often find is, to identify some of those pain points, you need to know some of those transition periods of what's really happening as part of an experience. And so mapping each of those out into a really detailed blueprint or customer journey, so that I can then work with the team to go, is this correct? Is this what is happening? Are these the systems that we're using? Are these each of the micro interactions that we're having with customers? And then as part of that, I'll then work with the team to understand what's not working, where are some of the issues, or I'll identify that myself from observing the team completing the role. And I often use a tool that's called rose, thorn, buds. So rose is what are the positives? Thorns, what is the negatives as part of the experience? And then buds, what are some of the opportunities that we have as part of the experience to start to improve it? And so I might just have a drink. And so as part of that kind of analysis, I'm starting to gather the positives. So what are the parts that we potentially want to keep as part of the experience? What are the negatives? So what do we want to change, or what's not working as part of the experience? And then what are those opportunities for us to make the experience better? And after so I'll gather like those types of findings, and then I'll also put together as part of that, what are the insights that we have as part of this experience? So kind of grouping together some of those pain points or positives or opportunities to start making insights or findings as part of the experience. And then the other part of analyzing the experience is running that research as well. So with customers to understand how they've engaged with the experience, running different types of interviews. So it might be resonance testing to test some concepts with them, or it might be any other type of research as well to really start to analyze that experience as to how do we want to improve it, or even testing the experience. So if we change this, what happens, or running prototypes as part of that as well. And then how do you identify pain points? So this is one where it's sometimes it's from observing people as to how they do their role. And so an example I might use is, say, for sales agents, what they were doing was they were taking notes in a different tool because our current tool wasn't working. And so what they were doing is taking the notes in OneNote or a different system, and then they were re-entering them into our system that we use at a previous organization. And so from this, what we're starting to understand is that the tool's not working for them. And so therefore they need to come up with workarounds as part of that. And it's meaning that they're having to duplicate their work. They're not knowing if they've collected all of the information. They're then potentially having to call up customers again to gather any other pieces of information. Or it also means that we're needing to get someone else to fill in that information, or it also just extends out the experience as well. And so because they have to do this duplicate piece of work, they're needing to repeat activities. So therefore the process takes longer. And so from that, identifying the pain points is really through that observation of seeing how people are doing things, and also talking to people about how they do different roles or jobs as part of their job. And so identifying those pain points is really, there can be different levels of pain points. So it could be something that's like unspoken. So a lot of the time what I find is that people just do things because they've always done it, and they won't realize that actually that's not necessary, or there's like a different way that they could do it, or that there could be a tool that's built to help them with that. And so from observing is often a way to really start to understand some of those things that they don't realize until someone else that's external comes in and starts looking at it and realizes that that's maybe not the best process, or we could come up with a better way of doing it. Speaking with people to understand what are some of their frustrations, or what are some of the things that they really don't enjoy doing. And then also, like I was saying before, from mapping out the experience, you can start to see, say, we ask a customer for this piece of information, but then at this other part of the experience, we're asking them again, or we're asking them to go log into another tool. Therefore, they had to go remember their password, then they had to come back to us, and then they had to find the new screen, change apps or anything like that. And so by doing that deep mapping of the experience, you can start to understand where it's working and where it's not, and where should you start to improve it. And then how do you co-create solutions with stakeholders and end users? So this is one that's my favorite. So I love co-design and being able to design with other people. And so this is where the facilitation skills really come to life, because it's around running those workshops with customers or stakeholders to really start to design out solutions. And so this is when you're coming up with new ideas. So you've mapped out the experience, and now it's time to basically design out ideas and solutions for solving some of those pain points that we identified. And so this is where I'll run a workshop with stakeholders, and I'll come up with a bunch of different activities for them to start to come up with these different solutions. And so say for an example, when I was working on designing out an improved like mobile experience, what I was doing was getting people to basically, I'd give them like the problem statement, and then I get them to start to sketch out that any of their ideas, or coming up with a bunch of different ideas as well as part of that, or using different types of activities for customers or stakeholders to come up with those ideas as well. So giving them maybe prompts to use. So one of the activities that I really enjoy doing is like a creative matrix, which is where we have different names or different types of things across each of the different axes. So it's like I think it's a 4x4 kind of table, and then it's using that to give them a problem statement and come up with solutions as to, if we were Disney, how would we solve this? If we were Tesla, how would we solve this problem? And coming up with those ideas to really start to think differently as well. And so to create it with our users as well. And then the same with customers, kind of running those similar types of activities. Or even, I always love to do a card sort with customers to go, we have these different components. How would you design this experience to understand, like, where are they putting really important pieces of information? What is that hierarchy that they're creating when I give them different pieces of a screen? So what I'm going to do is a bit of a wrap up, and then we can go into some of the questions that you might have. And so just to kind of summarize in terms of what is service design. Service design is really about, we gather the insights and understandings that help to define our experience vision, to unlock value through the tactical and strategic solutions. And so it's really around understanding all of those different components of how it works together. What is that end-to-end experience? Where do we want to get to? And then therefore, how do we deliver it as an organization to start to break it down and deliver pieces of value to everyone as well? If you want to, feel free to connect with me. So on LinkedIn, or I also have a newsletter that I share out every month or so in terms of like things that are coming up on design or any like new thinking or processes or tools. So feel free to reach out. You can scan the QR code. I also do coaching and stuff like that. But I choose a really bad color because now I'm yellow. But I thought I'd put the audience out, put it out there to the audience. If there's any questions or things that you wanted to ask, just based on service design or any other questions that kind of came up as we went through. But if you don't want to ask them here, feel free to, you can send me a message or anything like that as well.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, drop it in the chat. I was a bit curious though, if you're like a designer who wants to apply to a service designer role, do you think your portfolio kind of is similar to like a UI UX portfolio, or do you think it could be catered more towards that?
Yeah. So slightly different in terms of my portfolio to that. So often I'll have journeys or blueprints mapped out as part of mine. And so showing that end-to-end experience is super important to show that this is what the experience was. And then potentially then also having like that future state experience like mapped out as a journey. And then also talking through a lot of the different workshops or ways that you've identified the opportunity as well is super important as part of a service design portfolio. And then also some of the interviews might be slightly different that you're running. And so making sure that you're including some of those different components and tools that service designers use as part of your portfolio is super important as well.
What tools do you think you use the most then?
Yeah. What I was going to also add is like how you talk about the project as well. And so talking about the different roles of people as well is really important, of knowing like this is how someone does their role. This is what we're working towards. This is what we wanted to really improve. So a lot of the tools that I'll use is, so obviously research and generating insights. So making sure that insights are included in your portfolio is really important. Then blueprints or journey maps or anything like that. And then sometimes what I'll do is, it'll really depend on what I'm visualizing, but I'll have like storyboards as well that I'll include as part of my blueprint or as part of my customer journey. And so to map out those interactions between people, because service design is really about how do people interact in different moments in time as well. So being able to visualize those interactions, what's working, what's not, as part of that. And then also, like I said before, some of the tools is like even just a comparison of them as well. Like, so what is our future state? What is our current state? How are we getting towards each of those? Opportunity areas. So being able to map out like what is the opportunity that we're solving, and using a bit of like a business case or structure to communicate that as well. And then also even just some of the design tools, like some of the research methods that I run as well. So say if you're running ideation sessions, often I'll include some of those different tools or activities that I've come up with as well, or even some of the mapping, like the in progress mapping as well of like a blueprint as well is super important.
Okay, I mean, I think thank you so much. Could you go back to the previous slide then?
Oh yeah,
So maybe
sorry.
people could just reach out to you.
Yeah, sorry. I'll just find. Now I'm not yellow, so that's perfect.
Yep,
Yeah, so feel free if you have any other questions or anything like that to reach out.
yeah. Okay, I guess we can wrap things up now. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Well, that's okay. Thank you all for coming along. I really appreciate it. It's been lots of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.